Welcome to Larp Academia, and today we're going to talk about large battles in Belegarth. Now, large battles in Belegarth are interesting. Unlike a whole bunch of other LARPs, you have something, or the lack of something, that makes large battles be wholly unique. That is magic. Now, if you see some other LARPs out there, they don't really have shield walls or shield lines. It's kind of more of a skirmish here and there, where you might be with your small pocket group of a few people, or this flank that's kind of diverted off the main force, but that doesn't matter because no one's going to take advantage of it since everyone's their own individual little adventuring group. Because if you have a shield wall, well, that shield wall means that those people who have shields are targets for magic. And magic will be able to shove, move people around, freeze people, make a shield wall disjointed, and I mean, they might fight in a little choke point, but that's about it. That's the closest you'll ever get to true line-on-line fighting in any sense of a historical sense. And it really does become more of a adventure type game, to where you could be fighting and then you hear, what? Oh, we scored a point? Or, oh, we won? That's cool. You had no idea any of that was happening. In Belegarth, large group games are more of a cohesive unit because those numbers actually mean something. If you have more people than the other side, you're able to do some other stuff. If you have small elite groups, you're able to use them differently because it's not going to be little pockets here and there where you send them in trying to sneak past other people to get whatever objective. No. In Belegarth, you are a cohesive unit. You'll know when you're losing because your whole side will feel it. You'll all try to reinforce it as a team. And with that team feeling, you will be able to have a completely different experience that is actually more historically accurate. So, what can large battles in Belegarth look like? To that, we can actually kind of look towards historical battles, to be honest. It's kind of the same. As you get more people in Belegarth fighting, 100 versus 100, or let's say you're at Chaos Wars, an awesome event, then you could have even more on each side clashing and fighting, and it becomes this interesting sort of dance to see what happens, to see who trips and stumbles, and then have the other side be wolves and take advantage of that. Well, that's what big battles are kind of like. And the first thing we need to talk about with the battles is the structure of it. We talked about how magic is not going to go against a shield wall, but what would you expect? In Belegarth, your shields, why they're so awesome, is that they are impervious to everything except red weapons. If you have someone come out there with a red weapon, red, and they swing, they are open for so long. And if you have a good group of shieldmen who are protecting a pole or a spear person, then they're able to stab them with their range. You might even have someone who has a projectile just throw it at that person because their wall kind of breaks open for that person with red swinging and then closes again, or it kind of trips them up. It's kind of a mess, but that's the only way to really get past shields. And shields make up the huge bulk of it. So you have these clashes of just line on line, going, and it's extraordinarily difficult in order to make any true headway. That's why there are a few tactics you can use. Now, we talked about numbers. Well, numbers are important. A bigger number is better than a smaller number. I know, shocking. But think about this. You have 5 people here, facing 5 people here. They have more than the other side, the 10 people do. So the 10 people have their 5 go on their 5, and then, as my pinky wraps around, they wrap around the sides, and they kind of close in. Now, why this is important is that if you are fighting one-on-one, you know, it's a fight. It's hard, it's medium difficulty, whatever else, but it's one-on-one. Now, if someone flanks you, you have to fight 2 people. Naturally, you'll want to shrink back. You shrink into your line shrinks a little bit, and then there's more chaos that's ensued. You don't have anywhere to back up to. You don't have any footwork. You're being able to be pressed not only from one side but from the other as you're trying to defend 2 places, and you're going to die. When you die, that now makes it so that that side is able to press in, or this side is able to press in. It continues this press, and it's able to actually get a whole bunch of other kills because, again, you are fighting from two different sides. And that's why flanks are so vital. Is because if you are fighting from two different sides, it's so much harder. So one thing that you will find is that a group of people, even if they're the same number, might, instead of making this little ball and ball just clash, they might open up to create a thinner line. Now there is some risk in this. If this line is only one row deep, then all they need to do is make a little poke in it, and then blah, they just engulf it and then just kill everyone, because of the same thing that we talked about before, flanking, is that if you're able to puncture a hole in the middle, you can spread out and then not only have them fight from two sides, but three, and if you're fighting front, side, and back, you are so screwed, my friend. So that is why breaking through the middle is actually very important. So when you go from this ball to this, you can be taking a risk if you have the same numbers. However, one thing that this can do is, instead of them just blah, breaking through, you can wrap around them. And this is the exact same thing that happened with flanks earlier, is that instead of just fighting one-on-one, you now are fighting on this side, and you could even use your fingers to, well, not your fingers, but you could even wrap around further to make them face three separate points of attack, and you can wrap around them completely to where they can't defend, they can't back up any further, even as an entire army. So then they're just jostling against each other, which means they'll be stabbed easier because they can't move, they can't defend properly, and that is just awesome. Now those are some basic formations, and these are different formations and ideas that come naturally, even to a big group of people, is that, hey, if we can flank them, then we can make it harder for them to fight and we can win. Yeah, that's true. That is some of the basics you'll find in Belegarth. Finding anything more complex for 100 plus people is a little difficult. We're not Roman trained Legion soldiers or anything. We just go out there and we fight with our brothers and sisters, just having fun. And yeah, it's not that great. But what about elite groups? There are small elite groups in Belegarth, just like there are in any LARP out there. You might have a group of fighters that have been fighting for a long time together. You might have them in some form of company, whatever else. They can actually be a small group of elite fighters, and this could be 4 or 5, whatever, maybe even a little bit bigger. What can they do? Well, there are a few things that they can do. Remember that split that we talked about, where they make an impact and then spread out by having you face 3 different directions, and it's just bad? They're able to go in and try to make a wedge if this is a small army on army. Again, if they see that the line is spread out too far, or your lines are spread like this, where it's just 1 to 2 rows deep, they could try to charge, push through, break apart that line, and they might not even die. But even if they do die, they have taken so many with them and destroyed that line beyond repair that you'll be able to flank the entire time and the game will be won. That is one way that they're able to actually be useful. Now, is this used that often? I've seen it, but it's not common. See, the problem with this is that if the enemy is in like a little ball, or they even have 3, 4, or 5 rows deep when it's like this, you could try to go in as a wedge with these small elite people, but they're not going to be able to get very far with just 4 or 5. You need to have it as a calculated army strategy, and that's still haven't seen that be actually pulled off really well. Now, the other thing that small elite groups can do is they can try to poke the flanks. For poking the flanks, they're able to go out from the sides, away from the little ball, just here, and they're able to attack the enemy's flanks. Again, instead of just bashing in, you have your army bashing in, and then you have this small little group poking kind of the front area. Now, what do I mean by poking? I mean, get a pole. Get something that's long so that you can poke away, and have a few shieldmen to protect you. These shieldmen will protect you from arrows, and if they're a small elite group, when some people go out and try to play hero, they can cut them down. If their army tries to chase you as a small elite group, you're able to just pull back, since you're only in 4 or 5 people, and then, or a little bit more even, but still, you're able to pull back and pull parts of their army away so that there's a weakened area that your team can take advantage of. Now, I do not recommend that a small elite group goes in from the sides and then just clashes in sword on sword. I mean, they'll just wrap around you, kill you, and then make all that effort go to waste, and your small elite people are not going to be that great. The other thing that a small elite group is able to do is be back as reserves. Now, I've seen this a few times, not as much, but the idea is that when your line is weak in a certain area, like again when they were going to punch through, or if they find a weakened area and try to go through, your small elite force can go reinforce it and change the tide to where, since they've kind of overextended themselves to try to go in, that small elite force can go and just murder them. So that is another usage of small elite forces, but they're not as useful as other LARPs where it's just, oh, I'm a small elite force, our 4 versus your 4, we're going to roll through those 4, roll through another 4, roll through another 4, and get the objective, and then we win. It's not going to be as good. You can maybe have this small elite group go hide in the back, try to go from behind using the terrain, hiding in the bushes to go sabotage them, hit them from the back, maybe kill a whole bunch of people, run away, and do some hit and run tactics. Yeah, that's possible, but usually that's not the case. Usually it's more just open battlefield, and that doesn't really work out too well. But how can you use the terrain in a large group to make it so that you have an advantage? Well, using the terrain is pretty helpful if done correctly. If you have those bushes and everything else, you can use those kind of as barriers to your own army versus their army. If, for example, you have these balls that are hitting each other and one army tries to skirt around in the forest and attack you from the sides, well, they're losing part of their army to go through difficult terrain. It's harder for them to move around, and they're not going to be able to charge you as quickly or anything like that. They're not going to be able to shoot or throw things as easily through the forest if it's somewhat dense, or even if there's just low-hanging branches here and there. It just makes it so that it's more of a trap to go through the forest than it is a benefit. Now, we talked about forest fighting, but there's also other types of terrain that you can use. You can have walls that kind of make natural choke points for you to fight through and focus on. You can pretend there's water and there's a small bridge that you guys have to cross. Those are obviously important points. But the most common type of terrain that people will talk about are uphill and downhill terrain. Now, this may surprise you, but uphill terrain, being uphill, is only good if you're on the offensive, and actually harmful if you are on the defensive or have to retreat. I know, strange idea. And why is that? Well, think of it this way. If I'm fighting uphill, what do I have to cover? My upper body. Why do I have to cover my upper body more so? Well, because if the other people are uphill, they're swinging down like this, obviously bad body posture, bad body mechanics, they have to poke like this, and they're only able to really hit your upper body easily. Their lower body is also very exposed, and if you're going uphill and you just swing like this, you might hit a leg, so they need to worry about their entire body. And this doesn't give you an easier time to make kills happen, but it makes it so that you are actually kind of in a better position, to be honest. And if you've ever tried to retreat uphill, it doesn't really work out well, because now you're going uphill, you're going against momentum, and it's not great. If you are on the offense, though, charging down, well, we already know, line-on-line clashing, shield bashing, so fun. Check out our video on that to figure out how to shield bash a bit better. But when you go downhill, you're able to use your full body weight, full momentum, still be safe when doing it, but it makes a better impact onto people. And this makes it so that it's easier to make those gaps in the line, and you're able to go in and hit people with swords, poke them with spears and everything else. And having an offensive charge down a hill is amazing. But you have to be on the offense. Otherwise, upper and lower terrain is not the best, unless, of course, you have some sort of fortification. If you have some fortification to protect your legs, well, they have to now hit your upper body, and they're going to hit a wall most of the time, so fortifications can change things. I've only rarely seen fortifications be used and be used well by an entire army, but fortifications can make a difference. Now, one other way that terrain can actually really impact the battlefield is against projectiles and archers. Archers, when shooting on the battlefield from an uphill, have a lot easier time. They're able to shoot down, and it makes the people on the enemy side either have to choose, do I defend against the person in front of me or defend against the arrow? And if I'm defending against the arrow, well, a few things are open. And that makes it so that they have to make a choice. Again, it's the same idea as a flank, and archers are just as good as a flank just by having an arrow drawn. They don't even need to fire it. They just have the arrow drawn, and that's as good as a flank sometimes with terrain if you're uphill. With terrain, when it comes to fortification or forest, it makes it so that it's likely for your arrows to get lost. It's not very good, and you can be hampered by the terrain a lot. But what impact do projectiles have in a large event game? Well, if you checked out our video on archery in Belegarth, we talked a lot about going and picking off people from the sides and kind of standing out from the main army and trying to hit people in the flanks. And that's because it's really hard otherwise to even do archery, and it's not as big of an impact. So when you are an archer and the two sides have clashed and are engaging in melee, a lot more can get done with melee than can get done with ranged projectiles. And if you are shooting ranged projectiles, you need to either A, be aware not to hit your own teammates when you're shooting into the front of the line, or B, try to hit the sides, which have nothing else to do except to watch you. And if the line keeps getting spread out more and more and more, well, either A, you're not going to have a good shot, or B, it's going to be very hard to shoot someone while not hitting your own teammate. Friendly fire is still something that happens, so you need to be very aware of this. You also need to be aware of other archers, other small flanking groups or small elite groups that are going out to flank, and you really are there to try to just keep people in line on the other side. I know it doesn't sound as glorious as you would want, and it's not as glorious as just these little 4 or 5 pockets of people and you're just able to snipe here and there at different pockets, and all these different groups have to pay attention to you. Usually it's more just one big ball, and it's kind of harder for archers to really do much, to be honest. Now this applies to archers and javelins. You still have a place, but it's best to do your shooting and your range attacks with javelins before you engage in melee clashes, if possible. Now, the other types of throwing weapons that you have are rocks. Rocks can be just, little throw, like a little surprise in melee combat, but again, it's just not that big of a deal. The main range that you have is archers, and archers that shoot bows are best to mainly keep the enemy team in line, or hey, if they're not paying attention, you might score an awesome kill or at least a wound to someone, which can lead to the collapse of a certain part because that person's wounded when they go up to be reinforcements or whatever else. You do still have a place, you can help, but just know that your role is very selective. We talked about it in the archery video a little bit more of what you'll be kind of doing, and this does apply to bigger battle games or bigger games as well, but it's a hard life for an archer on a big battlefield to really make an impact or really get those kills and find the proper angle, unless of course you are uphill. Of course, these tips and things are more applicable for the more people that you have. If it's 20 versus 20 clashing, well, that you do naturally kind of want to stay in a line, but it is more likely to have people splinter off, and it gets more messy at that point. 30 on 30, it's getting more and more of a line. 50 on 50, yeah, it's definitely lines clashing or big balls of armies clashing. Usually it's more of a line because they want to try to spread out, and then it happens. So this advice is more applicable the more people you have in your game, and it's more likely that you'll see these things play out. But that has been my experience with LARPing in general, but also Belegarth bigger battle games. I haven't been able to experience as many as I wanted by this point because of plague, but for those of you who have experienced more of these big battles, for those of you who have actually gone through it, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below, and if you have something to correct me on or something to add, I would love that as well. But don't forget to like, subscribe, and ding that notification bell so that you can stay updated on more Belegarth and other LARPing content in the future. Until next time, keep LARPing!